Hey. Welcome to the weekly live stream with yours truly, Dr. Sarah Webb. I'm really excited about this week. I have some video clips I'm going to show y'all. And we're talking about how it's deeper than that. This is the third episode in my series on colorism and the media. And we have been on a journey talking about my personal experience and why I wanted to do this. And then we looked at how the media is influencing us in various ways. And now I'm going to look at specific shows and talk about how there are instances of colorism that might have flown under the radar for some people. And in fact, when I've talked to people about these series, episodes, etc., many people have said, I didn't even notice that. I didn't even see that. I didn't even think of that. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. And it's less about the specific shows or the specific movies, and it's more about the practice of thinking critically when we consume media, right? And so regardless of what the actual content is, we all have to learn to be looking for these nuanced, subtle messages, the nuanced, subtle narratives that might be perpetuated in the various things that we consume. And also, I'm really going to be emphasizing the need to critique everything, even if we like it, right? And so maybe some things don't have a whole lot to critique, but nothing's perfect. And something that seems perfect to you might not be perfect to someone else. And so last week I talked about, my focus being colorism, but something that gets an A plus on being anti-colorist might get a C minus on its queer representation or its representation of people with disabilities. And so there's always room for growth. It's really hard to have one narrative that's gonna make everyone feel seen. I think sometimes it's easier in TV shows because you can have multiple episodes, but certainly in things like movies, even music videos, like all the various forms of media, there's always more that could be said. Now, before we dive into the content, say hello in the chat. Y'all know I like to interact with y'all, see what y'all up to, see what y'all talking about, okay? So let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know what your zodiac sign is. Hey, Michael, I was hoping to see you in the chat. I wish I could give thinking back to my educator days, I wish I could give bonus points for being the first one to show up every week. Says, yes, let's take a closer look today with the magnifying glass. I forgot I could also show these comments. So everyone say, hey, Michael, all the way from the Netherlands. Hey, Latoya from NY. What's up, Latoya? I might be in NY at the end of September. Not for long though, just for a couple of days, but I would love to do something like have an official colorism healing event in NY one of these days. Hello, Kentilius. Kinley from Chicago. Virgo, my season is upon us. Okay, Kinley, happy Virgo season. Happy birthday season to you. I love Chicago too. Chicago's one of those things that feels like home. Oh, Latoya, if it's coffee, you ain't saying nothing but a word. I be looking for excuses to go to a coffee shop, especially in New York. Send me an email or a DM on Instagram. All right, so we'll have time towards the end for official questions and Q&A. Those of you who have been with me a few times, you know that I definitely will come back to the chat after I share some of my thoughts, and then we can dive into a discussion. Also, leave your own comments, your own perspectives on anything I share, and offer other examples, maybe that I didn't include, okay? Says, hello, Vanessa from Berlin, living in Germany, but from Massachusetts and in Aries, Midnight Milkshake. Okay, what's the story behind the screen name? I got to know the story behind that screen name. That's a really cool screen name, Midnight Milkshake, aka Vanessa from Berlin. Hey, do you listen to the Red Lection podcast? I did an episode with Carol on the Red Lection podcast. He's based in Germany as well, and I think a lot of his episodes are in German, but mine was in English, obviously. I don't speak German yet. All right, folks, let's get into it. I'm excited to show y'all my throwback content, but first, let me go back to my intention. So I like to set intentions for everything I do, and I want to be more transparent about them every episode. And so my intentions for this episode, but also the whole series and kind of pretty much everything I'm doing with Colorism Healing, is one, to have fun. I want to enjoy these things because they take a lot of work, they take a lot of time and effort and energy, and so they might as well be somewhat enjoyable, okay? But part of the fun for me is making those connections in real time. So don't be shy about introducing yourself. Don't be shy about talking about your experiences. That's why I do the lives, is to hear from you all. And then also I want to have conversations where we can circulate ideas and go a little bit deeper. There are lots of conversations like this, but it's rare that we can really sit with a topic for an extended period of time. What I notice often is when colorism is addressed in mainstream media or in like larger outlets, it's like just in passing, we're gonna hit it for this one episode and then revisit it in 5 years, you know? But here we get to like go in week after week. And then the last intention, of course, is to facilitate healing and transformation. All right. So as I'm setting these intentions and getting ready to jump in, I am in an alternate location because the place I'm renting here in Salvador, I love Salvador. I've been loving Brazil, but the place I got to recently, the Wi-Fi is really, really slow. So I'm using an alternative setting that's not really quiet. Okay. It's not the most quiet location, but the Wi-Fi is fast, and so that's what I needed. Hopefully not too many people are coming and going. All right, so let's look at this presentation that I have here. So I'm gonna play a video clip for y'all, and I want you to type in the chat if you recognize who is in this video. Okay, I'm gonna have to play it a few times. I'm gonna put it on loop. All right, so that was my throwback clip. I said I was going to start every session with the throwback photo of myself, but this time I did a throwback video of myself from that time in my life when I was as an extra on Queen Sugar. It's me, yes. So that was an episode in season 4 or 3 or 4 of Queen Sugar. When I was still living in Louisiana, I responded to a call for extras, and I was lucky enough that it was a scene where Rutina Wesley was doing like a book reading. I was like, that's the perfect scene for me. 1, because I love Rutina Wesley. 2, because I'm a writer. I love books. I like the whole artsy vibe. It was really cool. And so this is my post from 2018. I posted on Facebook. I was like, y'all saw me on Queen Sugar last night. My heart leapt when Rutina Wesley walked on set. Girl crush any day of the week. So I mentioned in my preview post that I wanted to talk about Queen Sugar, and I'm sharing how I was excited about being an extra on set, and I want to emphasize that all of the pieces that I'm going to talk about and discuss today, like, we can enjoy them and still acknowledge the ways that they might perpetuate colorism or misogynoir or forms of anti-Blackness to some degree, right? And there are some that I have to stop watching. I will make note of the ones where it irked me so much that I had to stop watching the show or stop watching the movie or whatever. But sometimes it's the nuance, right? Holding space for the fact that something can be imperfect and yet still be great or still be beautiful. I usually don't read the chat, but it's like y'all have saying so much. Somebody says, Brazil, ironic you chose the home of racial democracy to discuss colorism. What's her name from True Blood? It's Rutina Wesley. Yeah. Now we got that Queen Sugar and Spice. Michael leaves the best comments. So with Queen Sugar, can I do it from up there? Can I advance my slides from on the screen? Let's see. Okay. So a couple of things I wanted to share about Queen Sugar that I learned and discussed previously was that it's based on the novel, right? So some of y'all might know that or be aware of that. But it in the novel, in the original story, Rutina Wesley's character, Nova Borderline, didn't exist. So it's based on the novel Queen Sugar. And in the novel, it was only the light-skinned biracial sister and the non-mixed black half-brother, Ralph Angel, that were originally a part of the story. And so when I started thinking about some things that seemed off for me with Queen Sugar, I thought that that might be a source of the problem, a root of the problem, was the fact that they had to write in the dark-skinned black sister into the storyline. And I think it kind of maybe, right? I wasn't in the writer's room. I haven't read the original novel. I'm not in Hollywood or entertainment at all. But I just wondered if that contributed to what seemed like difficulty in creating a narrative for Nova's character. It seemed like there was a struggle to create a storyline for her that was worthy of her character, right? Like, I love her character, but I don't think that her storyline did her justice, right? And so that was one of the first things I noticed. But I still love the visual representation, right? I love just seeing her. I love the way she dresses in the show. I love the fact that she was a writer and a journalist. And so all these things, and it was set in New Orleans, you know what I mean? It's, Kofi Cerebo is in it, right? Like, there's a lot of reasons to watch Queen Sugar. But I found it more and more disappointing that Nova seemed to be a lost character, right? Like, the writers didn't really know where they wanted to take her character, whereas other characters seem to have more of a cohesive storyline. And then also, I think the fact that the original novel that the show was based on, Charlie, again, the light-skinned biracial character in the show, she was the main character of the novel. And I think that comes through in the show as well. So although they do a really good job of showing people like Aunt Vi and Hollywood, which are my favorite, Hollywood, I am team Hollywood all day. It's still pretty obvious, right? Like, of the three siblings, just in my perspective, I haven't seen every episode of Queen Sugar, right? Because I kind of fell off of it. But it was kind of obvious that Charlie was the main character. And if you consider the fact that the novel it's based on, she really was the main character. And even in the novel, Ralph Angel's character was more of an antagonist, right? So she really didn't have a close relationship with her brother in the novel, and he was sort of against her, like they were at odds, like they were fighting over the land and things like that. So they did a lot of rewriting and for the series, as they often do, from going from book to movie. But I think that in particular, the inconsistencies are the things about Nova's character that didn't seem worthy of who her character actually were might have started there. But there was something else about the show that I found interesting / disturbing. And I posted about this. Let me make this bigger. I posted about this. It's probably small on your screen, but it was June of 2018. So June of 2018, I put this on Instagram. I said, Queen Sugar provides a textbook example of how colorism and gender intersect in the portrayals of Ralph Angel's romantic and sexual partners. And it says I have to lean in because it's small on my screen too. In one episode, he lets his light-skinned sex partner into his home, even with his son being home, right? But he wouldn't let his dark-skinned sex partner into the house at all, and instead they had sex outside. That subtlety was not lost on me. And then I continued, I said, even though he has sex with dark-skinned women in the show, there's no indication that he would ever date them, even though he is also dark-skinned. And so believing that dark-skinned women are attractive, are worthy just for sex and nothing else is no better than believing dark-skinned women are not attractive or worthy at all. All of this is more irritating because in his real life, at the time, Kofi Cerebo was in a relationship with a dark-skinned model named Ducky. And Black content creators, please do better by us, and no Nova Borderline's character, etc., etc. So I thought that that was a subtlety, and that was one of the earlier posts I shared where people were in my comments saying I hadn't even thought of that, like I didn't realize that. And to be honest, I feel like a lot of people think they're doing something when they put a dark-skinned person at all. Like the fact that there were dark-skinned women that he was sleeping with, they probably thought that they were being anti-colorist. They were like, oh, he's attracted to women of all skin tones. But that was particularly insidious and egregious, right? Because there was no, based on the storyline, based on the episode, there was no context to explain why the light-skinned girl could be invited into his home, even with his son being there, but the dark-skinned girl couldn't. There was no context for that other than the fact that they had different skin tones, right? Now, follow up to that, a year later, we have this. In June of 2019, this episode came out where Ralph Angel is dating a dark-skinned Black woman. Now, I don't have proof of this, but it felt like, at the time, it felt like maybe somebody has seen my Instagram post and was like, you know what? That Dr. Webb is on to something. She might have a point. That what would it mean if we had Ralph Angel actually have a serious love interest that was dark-skinned? And so this is an announcement of the post, one episode where Ralph Angel goes on a date with a new friend, right? And I noticed that they made a point over time, over a few episodes, to show his relationship to this dark-skinned woman evolving and growing and getting more serious, right? Becoming official. And at one point, I remember there was an episode where, I don't know if he said he was in love or if like Hollywood and the other guys were like insinuating that he might be in love or something like that, right? So it's like that season was a direct response, even if they didn't see my post, right? Just in terms of how it directly responded to what I was saying about how that narrative of that I actually have heard, right, in various ways of dark-skinned women can be sexually attractive to us, but will we marry them? Will we see them as life partners, right? So I thought that that was an interesting subtlety. Some questions, and I'm actually reading the questions as we go. Who wrote the novel itself? Was the author of the novel a mixed race person? No, the author was actually a dark-skinned Black woman. Let's see, author of, I looked her up. Yeah, Natalie Bazile, Bazile. Natalie Bazile, she's actually a dark-skinned Black woman with a short natural, which is interesting, right? And one of the essays by Alice Walker, the one that everyone quotes as coining colorism back in 1983, in that essay where she used the word colorism, the one that everyone quotes and refers to, part of that essay was her explaining how even before TV, even before movies, books, novels, fiction novels, American novels, even the ones written by African Americans, all focused on and centered light-skinned biracial characters, especially if they were women. And so this is not new to television. It's not new to movies, right? Like that trope of, well, let's see if we're going to write a novel or tell a story about the lives of African Americans, then we're going to make them the lightest African Americans. We're going to make them the people who are passing, right? Like that's a story we're interested in. It's like, tell us the story about the African Americans who are light enough to pass. And so that was in the early 20th century, people writing novels, but it continues, right? With that focus, like that being so interesting and that being seen as mainstream, right? Or that being attracting a crossover audience, you know? All right, but I don't just want to talk about Queen Sugar. I want to talk a little bit about, where am I? The Godfather of Harlem as being one of those TV shows that I stopped watching. Has anyone seen Godfather of Harlem? Let me know. So I really like Forrest Whitaker. I do. I think he's one of the best male actors, for real. I like the projects that he's in. So I was excited to try Godfather of Harlem. But then I noticed the colorism and I couldn't stomach it. I just couldn't. Although I thought the casting of who they cast for Malcolm X was actually pretty good. So in the show, his actual partner is a light-skinned woman. And I was like, okay, let's see who the other characters are, right? I was like, that really wasn't what made me stop watching the show, the fact that his wife in the show was light-skinned. What it really was the contrast of how the brown-skinned daughter, his daughter who was a brown-skinned black woman, as the only darker-skinned black woman in the whole show, right? So with his wife being lighter-skinned, and then there was another love interest. There was a black guy who was dating the Italian daughter of one of the mob boss, right? So you had the black mobster, the Godfather of Harlem. You had the guy on the other side of town who was Italian, right? And so his Italian daughter, they was super racist, right? And so he was mad that his Italian daughter was dating the black guy, but the black guy was just gung-ho on dating this Italian woman. He was head over heels in love, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna risk my life and I'm gonna fight. And the Italians are gonna go to war over this, like, a young Italian woman, right? The classic story. The birth of a nation. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. If you know the film, Birth of a Nation, right, which is one of the earliest films in history in the country, is all about fighting for the white woman's honor, saving her from the black man, the men of color, the dark-skinned people who would threaten her, right? So it was that trope going on. So those two things, you pile that on, but then that in direct contrast to the treatment of his black daughter, who was like, a mid-tone brown, like a mid-brown skin tone black woman, right? So she's portrayed as being addicted to drugs, not able to care for her daughter. She's shown in scenes where she's being violated and abused. So that's when I was like, okay, y'all can have that show. I love you, Forrest Whitaker. I'll have to catch you on your next project, fam. But that, and I labeled this hidden messages, but I don't know. Let me know what y'all think. I feel like that's not a hidden message. I feel like these messages really aren't hidden. I think it only takes a little bit of consciousness to see these things, right? And you have to be particularly oblivious, and apparently many people are, because I feel like a lot of people, as unhidden, as obvious and blatant as a lot of this stuff seems, there are still people sometimes who don't, it goes over their head. But I was like, so it's not just each of those individual scenarios, but it's also the contrast, right, of how this Italian woman is being treated and fought for versus how the black woman is being treated exactly the opposite, right? Like people are trying to punish her and ostracize her. I was like, yeah. And that wasn't even the main storyline, but I couldn't stomach it. I was like, nah. It wasn't the main plot, but I ain't want to see it as a subplot either. All right. So after The Godfather of Harlem, what else do I have on my list? It says, love your outfit. Oh, thank you, Jay. Really loved him in Rogue One. I Am Hura. Says Nyessa Vault. Says, haven't watched either show, but is any of the content and the characters supposed to be representative of actual events and people? Yes. For The Godfather of Harlem, yes. For Queen Sugar, no. So The Godfather of Harlem apparently was an actual person. I don't know, what's his name, like Bucky or something like that. Notice, this is Deep House Nation. Notice it's the same tribe promoting miscegenation across the entertainment spectrum. Right, it's pretty overt messaging. It ain't even hidden, especially with commercials promoting interracial couples over the last 5 to 7 years. Nyansus. Let me know if I'm saying your name correctly. You feel free to correct me if I'm not saying it correctly. It doesn't go over my head, but it's helpful to know if they were supposed to be representing actual persons. Okay. Bumpy. Oh, Bumpy. Thank you, Dane C. Bumpy Johnson. Yeah, so that was supposed to be a real person. All right, but we all know they take creative license. So I'm just saying, like, you don't have to, just even though Bumpy Johnson is a real person, you don't have to include scenes of a Black woman being violated and abused to tell Bumpy Johnson's story. All right, let me keep going. So for real, my blood pressure was going up when I was making this presentation. When I was working on this, I kept getting mad. Is that N-I? Nyansa? Nyansa. I think that's what it is. All right, so Wakanda Forever. Y'all know I've been talking about this one for a while. My Instagram post that caused a ruckus about the bald-headed demon joke. If you haven't seen that post, go scroll back in my archives. I might pin it to the top of I might repost it on, what I'll do is I'll repost it on YouTube. And so let me start with saying that overall, I feel like the message of Wakanda Forever was that, see, Black people ain't so special after all. I know I may be opening up a can of worms. I know. I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry. These are really just my, subjective perspectives as someone who constantly is thinking about the portrayals and the positioning of dark-skinned Black women in particular. But, so no spoilers if you haven't seen it, but really that's the takeaway for me is like, oh yeah, Black folks thought y'all thought y'all was special, but look, y'all ain't the only ones. Y'all ain't so special after all. But when it comes to the dark-skinned Black women, the brown-skinned Black women that held this film together, right, that created this film, that line with Winston Duke calling the general. How you come in at the general? The general? So my question, I'm going off script, y'all. I have my notes, but I'm kind of going off script, so forgive me. My question was, where were all the Black men in Wakanda Forever? If Winston Duke was the big name Black actor in the film, and his big scene in the movie is insulting a Black woman? Are we doing this right? Is that how we doing it? Really? So you can have a movie starring lots of different Black women, but you can't at the same time include or cast Black men who support and champion and love and appreciate and respect these Black women, or date and marry these Black women. So I also ask you this, because again, sorry, not sorry. How we get a Disney movie without a love story? How we get a Disney movie without a love interest? Where they do that at? When the last time y'all saw a Disney movie without a love story attached to it? Oh, the one where it's featuring multiple dark-skinned Black women? Okay, I see what y'all did there. Yeah. Fall series is different. Fall series Dr. Webb is different than spring series Dr. Webb. We ain't talking about corporate colorism. We talking about just regular old colorism. And I'll also include that while a lot of the examples I'm going to include are about love interests and romantic plots, and I actually have a whole episode that I'm going to do on love scenes just on that. We can say like, oh, well, it shouldn't always be about love or romance, right? But when it is, then it is. And so I just want to ask Disney, like, why all of a sudden y'all not interested in romantic stories anymore? When it comes time to cast dark-skinned Black women in y'all movies, then all of a sudden y'all don't need no love interests. Like, that's real suspicious, okay? I'll also, because y'all know I was like team the Woman King. I might be getting myself in trouble, y'all. I'm going to say it, but, just If you don't agree, feel free to say so or feel free to keep it moving. I just thought it was really interesting how people were like, I don't want to watch The Woman King because I'm tired of seeing black women fight. But they was okay with black women fighting in Wakanda forever. That's what the whole movie was about. So it's not just about what is being put out. It's also about how we respond to it. It's also about us looking deep within and saying, maybe I do respond better to casting of certain types of people than others. Maybe I don't support movies with dark-skinned black women. Maybe I'm always asking, oh, what can we do? What can we do about it? And then a dark-skinned black woman makes a movie and I'm like, nah, I'll pass. Not that you have to see every movie. Not that you have to see everything a dark-skinned black woman makes or does. But if you're looking for solutions, if you're saying like, oh, well, how do we change this? Here's an opportunity. Let me get back to these comments right quick. The message is the same. We need to breed you out. Ooh. Ugh. You're right, but it feels icky. But you're right. Yeah, what you're saying about that's actually a policy and a practice in places like Central and South America, right? It's called mejorando la raza, blanqueamiento la raza. It's like, oh, let's just keep marrying non-black people or keep marrying light-skinned black people so that eventually our great-grandchildren just come out something else, right? Like that's a legitimate practice. That's actually a practice that people do. It's not just representation in the media. And in fact, they've used the media to be propaganda to encourage that and to promote that. All right. So y'all know what time it is. I have the smartest subscribers and followers in the whole internet. And I dare anybody to disagree with that. Says Michael says, yeah, we talked about Wakanda Forever. Yeah, we did, Michael. Janelle says, and the length of which they took to tell Namor's story when no one else black had their story told that in depth. Good point. Ultimately, we have to tell our stories. We have to raise daughters and sons who honor us and not others. Every time they feature a black main character in Disney, they pair her with a non-black mate. The message is the same. We need to breed you out. It says, and Wakanda Forever contained more problematic scenes, all targeting General Okoye. So Michael be on point, y'all. Go follow Michael on LinkedIn. Yeah, so also all of the comic relief, all of the jokes were at her expense, were at General Okoye's expense. Whereas the non-black women, the indigenous Mexican women, they were treated with dignity and respect the entire film. Like they were never the butt of a joke, ever in the film. The non-black women, the indigenous women in the film, right? The Mexican actors and actresses, they didn't have to endure humiliating sarcasm and criticism. So why is that? And let me remind you, black people wrote the film and directed the film and could have made different choices. So we're not safe even when black people are at the helm. And yeah, we could talk about it's a multi-person effort, it's a team effort, sure. But I mean, put up a fight for us at least. I'm really, really curious, like who are the people that really go hard for us, especially dark-skinned black women behind the scenes. And let me keep reading the comments. It says facts, a stable, healthy, hetero, melanated relationship is part of the erasure agenda. You think people go and see the Marvels because it's directed by a dark-skinned black woman? Go ahead and start reciting Public Enemy's Burn Hollywood Burn. It's therapeutic. I have never heard that song. I'm going to have to check it out. Says, well, they are engaging in that willful breeding out to lightness and whiteness, but they are packaging it as acceptance of all, but it is not. Had zero, to be honest, Mexican people in Wakanda Forever had zero speaking outside of Namor. Yeah, they were, the underwater aspect because he was the only one that didn't have to wear the mask, right? Okay. Let me keep going. All right, so this show started out pretty good. Has anyone seen the show Your Honor? I guess it's on Showtime. I don't know where I was watching it. Your Honor features as one of its primary characters, one of its recurring, ongoing, significant role characters, a character named Big Mo. And let me get the actor's name right. Big Mo, Your Honor, is played by Andreen. What's Andreen's last name? Andreen Ward Hammond. Andreen Ward Hammond is the actress that plays Big Mo. Beautiful, gorgeous, dark-skinned, full-featured, full-figured Black woman. And her role is that of a drug dealer. Okay. So, not that you can't ever cast dark-skinned people as drug dealers, but when they're the only one in the show, she's the only dark-skinned Black woman in the entire show. And she just so happens to be a criminal, okay? Or committing a crime. And again, in contrast, you contrast that. So this is the one of the things y'all have to watch for, right? It's like, it's not just what is this particular storyline, but when there's a direct contrast to that storyline, that's when it really is driving home a point. So she's the only dark-skinned Black woman, but there are multiple light-skinned Black women. Y'all think they're drug dealers? You think any of the multiple light-skinned women in Your Honor are drug dealers, are queen pins? I'm gonna let y'all take a guess. What y'all think they do for a living? They are lawyers, doctors, lawyers, jazz singers. We had a jazz singer. That's one of the shows I had to stop watching. On top of that, there is this relationship that she has with a light-skinned woman. And I mentioned this in one of my previous lives about how colorism shows up in media through words, not just always visualizations or the casting. Because again, it's not just enough to have dark-skinned Black women in the movie, but it's how are they actually being portrayed in the movie or in the TV show or in the music video, right? So she's in a relationship with a light-skinned woman who's the jazz singer, right? So the light-skinned woman gets to be a creative artist and be portrayed as the feminine one, right? And so Big Mo's character is positioned, you can tell that they're trying to position her as the more masculine partner in that dynamic. So she's getting ready to propose to this woman and the woman rejects the ring, right? So again, setting up that dynamic to where the dark-skinned person is in love with and pursuing the light-skinned person instead of it being vice versa, right? Because people can't imagine that for some reason. But then also there are scenes where Big Mo is saying things like, to the light-skinned woman, saying things like, oh, you're so perfect and, you're so pretty and don't worry your pretty little head, right? Just emphasizing this notion that her light-skinned partner is pretty or quote unquote perfect. And we never and probably never will get those types of affirmations directed towards Big Mo herself. Who is going to tell Big Mo that she's the prettiest one at the ball, right? Who's going to tell Big Mo how beautiful she is, how gorgeous she is, how perfect she is? You know what I mean? So it's okay for the dark-skinned partner to shower their light-skinned partner with those types of compliments, but y'all aren't going to depict the reverse also being true. It's the little things for me that make a big impact. And because, some shows, there's enough diversity of representation to where you don't have to stop watching it because of a line or a scene or an episode, right? But in something like Your Honor, where there's not that kind of diversity, then that makes those lines and those scenes and that character that much more important in terms of representation. And I'll also say this too, the reason why we talk so much about the representation of Black people or the representation of dark-skinned Black women or dark-skinned Black people is because there already is so little of it that it's that much more important that we try our best to get it right when we do have it, right? And so people might be wondering like, well, why aren't, white women complaining about how they're represented? It's because they have enough diversity of representation to where they don't have to worry about it. If you see a white woman being a drug addict on TV, if you see a white woman being a criminal on TV, that is counteracted and counterbalanced by a myriad of other portrayals where she's not those things. Black people don't have that luxury. Black people don't have the luxury of saying like, oh, well, that was an unflattering portrayal. But don't worry, there are 1,500 other portrayals coming up in the pipeline where we'll get a second chance, right? And so that's part of why these things really get under our skin and why we talk about them so much and why they feel so important is because we are already working with such limited amount of representation that it puts that much more pressure on the representation we do get to do something for us, right? To not set us back or to not be perpetuating more of the same oppressive narratives. All right. It says, I'm confused about the plot of Your Honor. Is it about drug dealing? No. So my goal is not to tell you the plot of the show. It's to talk about scenes in the show that reflect colorist narratives or that are perpetuating misogyny war, or in this case, the masculinization of darker skinned women, right? So I don't really care if you understand the plot, right? We're not trying to talk about like, oh, this movie is about XYZ. I'm pulling out like really specific moments within these larger stories that are colorist or that perpetuate misogyny war, right? Or anti-Blackness or something like that. Janelle says, I agree, it's the juxtaposition of what the light versus dark characters are portrayed in the show. Says women are the biggest complainer about Hollywood and corporate America. I wonder why that is, Dancy. You ever stop to think maybe they get the brunt of what's wrong in those places? All right. Says, I know it's not safe to go there, but since a group inside a certain ethnic group keeps promoting and greenlighting this content, we as Black consumers need to also be aware of their goals. Yeah. That's the Deep House Nation. It is the goal of conversations like this is to make us more critical consumers. And I have an episode coming up. Hopefully Cheryl can join me. Cheryl is actually inside of Hollywood. She actually works in Hollywood. Because she's really opened my eyes to, how the people who control the purse strings also control the puppet strings, right? So the purse strings and the puppet strings are this one and the same in Hollywood and in many industries, right? Sports, art, the art world, all, just politics, right? The people who hold the purse strings also hold the puppet strings. And so there are levels to what people are beholden to, who people are beholden to, right? Like who's calling the shots, or we'll greenlight this project if we can have this person on it, or we'll greenlight this if we get something else out of it, right? Like, so there's so much politics behind the scenes. But again, let's say, you just decide to make a film and post it on YouTube yourself, right? Like not even going through Hollywood. Like you just get your camera, get your friends, y'all make something and post it on YouTube. There are people who make content in all types of ways outside of the mainstream vessels and venues. And even they can be colorist. Even they can perpetuate anti-Black narratives. Even they can perpetuate misogyny war. And so I'm not saying that, I guess part of what I'm saying is we can't think we're safe just because we're not in Hollywood, right? If we think like, oh, let's just get rid of Hollywood and then everything will be okay. Or let's just get rid of the mainstream music industry and make our own music. Even if we go that route of being independent, we still got to be getting on the colorism and getting on the anti-blackness and getting on the misogynoir and the other forms of oppression and the other isms. Just because someone's independent and making a film outside the confines or the structure of Hollywood doesn't mean it's going to be less colorist. Doesn't mean it isn't also going to be perpetuating a white oppressive narrative, right? Like anybody, rich, poor, black, white, male, female, can perpetuate anti-black racism. So yes, it's easier to talk about things like Hollywood. It's easier to talk about the mainstream stuff because more people have seen it, right? Like it's more accessible to people. It's more well known, right? Like that sort of thing. But I'm not just picking on Hollywood. I really don't care at the end of the day who made it. Does it perpetuate anti-blackness? Like that's what I'm trying to see, right? It's not even about like Hollywood per se. Like, yes, they have particular issues, like they have particular dynamics that make it more dangerous and deadly for people and more oppressive for various reasons. But we could just be talking about the TikTok video you posted on Saturday, and we're still looking at it with a critical lens. We're still saying like, yeah, you just randomly decided to post this video of you shopping at the mall, but it's colorist. But you perpetuated misogynoir. So that's the goal of this series. The series of colorism in media is big or small, establishment or independent, signed or unsigned, right? Like group effort or individual effort. Your Instagram post that's getting 10 likes or the blockbuster movie that's, making billions of dollars. Whatever we're looking at, whatever we're consuming, and whoever the source is, we have to be asking the tough questions, even if we enjoyed it, even if we liked it, even if we liked the director, even if we liked the actress, even if we overall liked the genre or the outcome or the storyline. Still take that lens and say, but what could be different? Where might we have change this narrative a little bit? Or is this a common stereotype? Is this a common trope? Always ask those questions. All right, I think I have one more show that I want to talk about. And that is Harlem. Now, I just have to say, when I heard about this TV show, I was excited because I like Harlem, the place, the city. And I know I always refer to Harlem as a city, even though it's like a borough in a city. But for me, it might as well be a city. Because, New York is cool, but I love Harlem, okay? Let's see. So with Harlem, I'll share that there's one trope that we see a lot, which is the 4 black best friends. And you have to have 2 dark-skinned best friends and 2 light-skinned best friends, right? You saw it in, what was the show? Girlfriends. Y'all remember that show, Girlfriends? I didn't really watch Girlfriends until some of my girlfriends put me onto it. And I was like, okay, it's kind of interesting. But there's this thing where it's like, oh, if we have 4 black women in a show, we have to make sure it's an even 50-50 split. 2 dark-skinned women, 2 light-skinned women. But you notice that there's always like a main character. Like, yeah, technically it's a story about 4 best friends, but let's be honest, there's a main character though. And the main character is usually the light-skinned one or one of the light-skinned ones. And in the case of Girlfriends, they weren't just light-skinned, they were also biracial, right? Which is an interesting choice in Hollywood in terms of casting. It's almost like they skip lighter-skinned black people who aren't mixed, and they just prefer not only light-skinned, but light-skinned and biracial. But with Harlem, first I'll say, the first scene threw me off because you have Megan Good. Oh, I wanted to ask y'all if y'all could tell who the main character was by looking at this poster. So in terms of visual rhetoric, when you're looking at a poster with multiple people on it, the giveaway as to who they want you to pay attention to is the one that's making eye contact with the camera. So yes, technically there are 4 women on the poster, but only one of them is making direct eye contact with the camera. That is a very subtle cue that that's the person who is the center of attention, who is the main character, the one that the storyteller, the people composing that image want you to pay attention to that person in particular, right? So little insider tip there. But with the show Harlem, I only got through like maybe 1 or 2 episodes, to be honest. So if you've seen more episodes, feel free to chime in. And again, like, I'm not really like, you could watch everything I just mentioned and love it. I'm not here to tell y'all to hate anything or to love anything. We're just offering forms of criticism, forms of feedback. So I noticed, again, not only like do you technically have an ensemble cast, but of course the main one though, the one that's narrating the show and everything, is one of the lighter skinned friends. But also there's this, who made the film, who made Harlem, right? I wasn't crazy about that. Let me make sure, see, this is a good thing about being on YouTube. Because I can fact check myself in real time. I guess I could have done that on YouTube as well. But when I saw who made it, oh, okay, so created and executive produced by Tracy Oliver. But I feel like somebody else was involved in the series. Like there was another name on the series that I recognized. What's the name? Is it the guy who made Boys in the Hood? Let's see. I can't remember. John Singleton. Yeah. I thought John Singleton might have been involved in Harlem as well. But with the 2 dark-skinned characters, when there's 2 dark-skinned characters and 2 light-skinned characters, I felt the same way with Queen Sugar. The development of the dark-skinned characters seems to be lacking. The episode I watched, one of the dark-skinned characters seemed to be there for comic relief. Like she seemed like you couldn't really take her that seriously. Right, she was sleeping on the light-skinned friend's couch. Also, let me just say, the portrayal of like the bougie lifestyle in Harlem. When Megan Good on that first scene, like the opening scene of Harlem, she's like, oh, and they're gentrifying Harlem. They're gentrifying Harlem, and now they're all these like hipster cafes. I was like, girl, you gentrifying Harlem. Y'all gentrifying Harlem. The characters in that show are gentrified Harlem. Just because they Black don't mean they ain't contributing to the gentrification of Harlem. Okay, but anyway. So the one with the yellow dress in the image, she's sleeping on the light-skinned friend's couch, right? She's kind of just like kind of lost in life, just kind of fumbling her way through life. She kind of wants to be a singer, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have the other dark-skinned character who's actually portrayed as a really successful career person. I think she's an entrepreneur, has her own business, etc. But there's also, again, she's also a more masculine character, right? And so you have the tropes of the 2 dark-skinned people being the comic relief, the one who's kind of laughable. This was just my assessment based on the 1 or 2 episodes I saw. And then you have another dark-skinned character who's more masculine, right? And so where are the in-betweens? Where are the shades of brown, the multiple shades of brown that we can have for dark-skinned women? And then the last thing I'll end on is Insecure, because Insecure is one of my favorites. And yet it does the same thing in terms of, oh, we have to have 4 best friends, 2 of them light-skinned, 2 of them dark-skinned, right? But I want to play this clip by Issa Rae, and then I'll really get into your questions, really get into the comments. Yeah. Oh, really? John Singleton passed away? I didn't know that. Let me switch to this other video here, And I didn't get the subtitles on it. And hopefully y'all can actually hear it. Can y'all kind of hear that? Let me know in the comments before I continue to play it. Were you able to hear sounds or audio from that video clip? Okay, so Midnight Milkshake says they can hear it. All right, so Issa Rae was speaking at Dillard University in New Orleans. And so I got to go and see her talk. This was like probably 2018-ish. And someone asked the question. It wasn't me. Somebody else asked the question about, did she purposely or intentionally cast two dark-skinned women as the main characters in Insecure? And so she says yes. And then I'll let it play and then I'll summarize what she says because I was recording on my phone, so the audio might not be that clear.
100%. That's something that I have to do. It's interesting because when you come on the show with two black girls, I just found it like for so many directors and directors. Once you die, what you to kind of negate what's been in the past. So I'm so glad that everybody now for that. He knows when I think the conversation that we have, and I'm grateful for it's just like that's not what I saw in my head for that particular just saying.
All right, so to recap, in case the audio was not clear enough for you all. So she said, yes, she intentionally chose two dark-skinned women, one to kind of negate what's been done in the past, what's frequently been done in the past. And she talked about the seeming obsession with, like, if we have two black women leads, they have to be light and dark. And she was like, no, two dark-skinned people can be friends, right? Like, if we're true to telling stories, it's possible for two dark-skinned women to be best friends with each other. And so she wanted to portray that. And then she even said that there could have or might have been light-skinned women who would have been great playing Molly in the show, but that's just not the vision she had for the character. And so she wanted to stay true to her vision, right? And so right, and I'm not saying, I don't know Issa Rae personally, so I don't know about her politics so I'm just not making an assessment about like her as a person, but I think it demonstrates that people can make different choices, right? I think that when there is intention, people can make a different choice. And at the time, Issa Rae has a lot of influence and a lot of power and control now. But when Insecure was coming out, she was still growing in her career, right? Like she hadn't even reached all of the levels of status she would reach now or here today. And yet she was still saying, like, I have this vision where the two main characters are both dark-skinned black women. And so I know that there's pressure, right? There's pressure to conform. And speaking of the Woman King, Viola Davis talked about this too, about how they fought for the decisions that they made, right? They fought to wear their natural hair on the show, right? They fought to have all of the superheroes be women, right? And so that's what we need more of. We need not just more black content creators. We need more black content creators who have a vision and who are willing to fight for that vision. Okay. All right. So let's go back through all of your comments. I really appreciate and respect y'all engaging in the conversation. I think even if you wholeheartedly, vehemently disagree with everything that I said, it's important to pay attention to this conversation, right? It's important to have the conversation, and it's important to be thinking about these things. And so that alone, I just want to thank you all for watching if you can't participate in the chat, but especially for the people who are also taking the time to type and using their energy and sharing in that way. So let's see where I left off in the comments. Let's see. Okay, so I think this is, Deep House Nation and Dames. He says, scripts are written before casting. Scripts are written early, but they can alter the context and flavor of an author's intent purely by casting. Yeah, no, they're constantly writing scripts as they're shooting. If you're on set, the directors, the writers, they can make changes to the scripts on set, like in the process of shooting. It says, if we're in the midst of pushing to have something come to screen, I'd make sure that whoever was cast actually embodied the value of what I wrote. Yeah, I think that's part of what I was just saying. I know your comment came in before I said that, but what you're talking about is fighting for the integrity of what you wrote, fighting for the integrity of the story that you're trying to tell. And I remember in reading one of Issa Rae's books, she said that in casting Insecure, they wanted to cast, what's that girl who played in that movie with T.I.? Laura London. They wanted to put her in Insecure, and she was like, absolutely not. So she turned down people who would agree to make the film if they could cast Laura London. And she was like, no, absolutely not, right? Like, not on my watch. And so we have to have more of that in order to see change. And I feel like too many people just will take the quick check and say yes, right? I think that's what's happened a lot, is that too often somebody has said, oh, well, let's make sure there's a light-skinned person or a biracial person. And too many people were like, well, you know, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I'm gonna take this easy money and like go with it, go with the flow. And even, this is way beyond the theme of hidden messages in media, but even those biracial and light-skinned women who knowingly take roles that rightfully should have gone to dark-skinned Black women, right? Like, that's also, if y'all claim to want to be in community with us, if you claim to want to be my sister, then you would not have taken that role. Zoe Saldana, Zazie Bates playing Stagecoach Mary. Like, if y'all really want to be in community with dark-skinned Black women, y'all would have stepped aside. You would have said, hell no. There ain't no way in the world I'm going to play the Nina Simone. Are you freaking kidding me? Okay. So it's a lot of folks who could make different choices and they chose not to make different choices. All right. Exactly. They can have and will rewrite scripts on the spot, especially if the financial backers say so. In other words, everybody can get this smoke. Yes. Actors say otherwise, namely Denzel Washington, but maybe I'm misunderstanding your point. Regardless, it's important to control the purse strings. To be honest, I would rather watch non-Black shows than Black shows depicting the BS. I feel you on that, Nyansa. I felt that way sometimes where the betrayal feels so much more deeper, right? And there was there are like a lot of movies made by Tyler Perry, not made by Tyler Perry, on BET, on TV One, like all of the usual places we would go to for Black content, that you would think that they have less excuse for the anti-Blackness, right? So I empathize with that. Since I've been scanning for African shows and movies. Yeah, someone told me that there's a Nollywood film called The One for Sarah. I think somebody, like, they literally just texted me. My phone is not within arm's reach, so I'm not gonna go get it. They literally just texted me about a Nollywood movie where the character's name is Sarah with an H. So I was like, oh, I gotta add that to my to-watch list. Deep House Nation, it's true an actor can complain about a scene and improv a scene, but they can't rewrite a script character on skin tone. So usually the script is written and then they cast. However, a lot of times, for example, let's use The Harder They Fall. So that script was written based on real life people. What was their excuse in that casting for casting a light-skinned biracial woman as to play or portray a very dark-skinned Black woman who actually existed, right? And so people don't necessarily mandate certain skin tones when they write a script. Now, usually if something's based on a novel, people will say, oh, in the novel, the character was described as dark-skinned, right? But if you're starting with a script, a lot of times screenwriters aren't mandating certain skin tones or describing certain skin tones necessarily. In a lot of movies, a lot of films, a lot of TV shows, they're writing the story. And so it's the casting directors and the producers and the directors that are saying like, oh, here's a character that's written as the love interest. Let's put a light-skinned biracial person in that role, right? And so to be fair, I don't understand your point in saying that the scripts are written beforehand. Yeah, there's just some excess noise. Oh, okay. What were they thinking that these women were permed and weaved? Says, well, Issa Rae's second show, Rap-ish, isn't getting the same success as Insecure. I think I feel you on that, but again, I don't know how that's relevant. Hollywood, let's see, having to have them reads like we need handlers to prove we are not a threat. Hint, the Nina Simone nonsense. Not only playing her, but doing so in blackface. You're right. Like, that's the level of how all the people involved in that project thought it was okay to put a prosthetic nose on Zoe Saldana and paint her skin dark. Nobody in the room said, wait a minute. Is this what we doing? Okay. Says Usmain Sambin put out some good ones, not Nollywood or necessarily recent, but they were relevant. Cola Booth put me onto him. Cola Booth, I was watching her YouTube videos even before I started Colorism Healing. So anybody watching who hasn't heard of Cola Booth, go check out Cola Booth. Yeah, she's one of my influencers from back in the day. All right, any other comments or questions? I see Michael drops off. I forget that Michael is in the Netherlands, so it's probably like really late where he is. All right, so let me give you your affirmations and your homework for the folks, or your reflection questions. So y'all know me, I don't just rant. I'm like, so here's what we're gonna do. Here are some takeaways, some things that we can start to practice. So one, do I ignore problematic aspects of things I like? This is important. Do I ignore problematic aspects of things I like? We're ending this series for the fall on music, because music is my personal favorite. I listen to more music than I actually watch TV and movies. And I remember when Beyonce's dad wrote his book, and like, this is not endorsing his book at all, but he came out talking about colorism as part of some of the things he wrote in the book. And he was like, yeah, my daughters have benefited from being light-skinned in the industry. And a lot of Beyonce fans, the Bayhive, were livid that anybody would suggest that she has light skin privilege. And I'm like, look, you can be a Beyonce fan and still keep it real about colorism. You could still be 100% honest that as great as you think Beyonce is, if she were dark skinned, you probably wouldn't even know her name. All right. So also, do I hold space for nuance? Do I hold space for nuance? And then lastly, do I allow space for learning and growth for myself and for others? So as we have these conversations around colorism and how it shows up in media, I think having grace with ourselves, that just because we might have missed something, just because we didn't recognize it in a piece of media before, it's like, okay, now we do recognize it. And so let's start being more selective. Let's start raising our standards, right? Like, let's raise our standards for the type of representation that we see of dark-skinned Black women, in particular, all dark-skinned people in general. And your opportunity for growth is to consider a piece of media you really enjoy and review it with a colorism lens. Right now, people like Nyana in the chat, like Deep House Nation, right? Like Michael in the chat, like the ones I see in the chat, like y'all already do this on a regular basis. So this is more so for people who don't really do this very often, right? A lot of the person who was texting me, like, we do this all the time. And so I'm challenging the rest of you to look through a colorism lens more often. Okay, don't just watch and say like, oh, that was funny, or oh, that was interesting, or that was entertaining, or I love the drama, or this was so exciting, or this sounds so good, right? Like, rewatch it, review it, listen to it again, and just put on a colorism filter and see if you see things a little differently. Okay. And then your affirmation. Did I write an affirmation? Oh, yes, I did. As I learn to hold space for the nuances of myself, I learn to hold space for the nuances of others. All right, let's see what last chats might have come in. It says, Oh, Michael's still here. Hey, what time is it in the Netherlands? I'm so honored you're still here. It says, interesting, he married the light skin but cheated with the dark. I can't remember who you're talking about. I don't know who I was talking about when you made that comment. It's actually hard for me to ignore colorism and related issues because it's very personal for me. However, I don't speak out every time I see it because many people don't even catch the instances. I feel you, Kinley. And I think it's not just that they don't catch them, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's that they'll gaslight you if you do point it out, right? Because it's cool if they don't catch it and you say like, oh, that was colorist. If people would respond with, oh, you're right, that absolutely was colorism, right? Then maybe you would speak up more. But I suspect that part of why you don't speak up is not only because they don't see it, they don't catch it, but also like if you do point it out, they'll be like, it's not that deep. Oh, you're reading too much into it. Oh, you're being too sensitive. Oh, no, it wasn't that. I've had people respond to me that way too. Like they'll try to rationalize what I'm saying or what I'm seeing. Like, oh, but maybe it was just really this, or maybe it's just a preference. So yeah, but it's important that when you do have people you can talk to, right? Like if you have a friend who is open-minded or someone in your family who is open-minded, like start pointing it out, because we have to help to raise that consciousness and that awareness. Again, it's primarily us as Black women, dark women, who will bring about this shift. That will happen as we continue to deprogram and heal. Ooh, Nyansa, I like your comments, fam. Thank you for being here today. Do you also follow me on Instagram? I don't know. The Instagram handles don't show people's actual names. So it might not be the same handle on Instagram as it is on YouTube. But yeah, I like what you've been saying this evening. It says we heal, our children heal, no more colorism, Matthew, Beyonce's father. I do believe at least one of the women he fathered outside children. Oh, Matthew knows. That's who y'all were talking about. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't have respect for the man because I really don't know enough about him, but I'm like, I just feel like he ain't my people. Not that he ain't black, like he black, a black person, but I feel like I wouldn't ride with Matthew Knowles. I don't know. But he did, part of what he was saying is that he married Beyonce's mom because she was light skinned, because he was a colorist, because he thought she was white when they first met. And then it's always, I think, part of the negative trope is that the dark-skinned woman can be the mistress, right? Like that's part of the negative stereotypes that we fight against as dark-skinned black women. Is like, no, I'm not gonna be the other woman for you. Like, I'm not, no thanks. Yeah, the gaslighting and rationalizations are very important to note. I have to look for it there. Yes, the second woman that cheated with was dark skin, I believe. Oh, it's not preference, it's programming. I hear you. All right, folks. So we're just chit-chatting at this point. I will timestamp if you're still watching, you don't need the timestamps. The timestamps will more so be for people who haven't seen the live version. But next week I'll be back, and I'm not sure what the topic is next week, but I'll pre-schedule it here on YouTube so you can click a reminder and notify us. And yeah, be sure to share this with people. If you don't want to talk to them, then you can just pass this along and be like, I thought this might be of interest to you. All right, y'all. Much love. Thank y'all for being here, and I'll see y'all next week.